everybody, Jane here, and this is my wrap-up for January 2021. I ended up reading 4 books, 1 nonfiction, 1 audiobook, 1 graphic novel, and 1 regular fiction. The fiction that I read was one that I owned. One of my goals this year is to read more from my owned TBR, though I will have to say this one was a little bit of a cheat because I just got it in November for my birthday from my brother. So, still owned, but, not one that has been living on my shelf for 100 years. So, I did start 3 other books, but I didn't quite finish them this month. If you want to see what I started but didn't finish yet, you're welcome to hop over to my TBR video for February because I will be continuing the 3 into the month of February. And hopefully February is a beautiful reading month and I get through a lot of books. So for January, the first book that I read that I finished in January was Heaven and Hell, A History of the Afterlife. So this is a nonfiction book that looks at kind of the origins of Christian heaven and hell. And I really want to kind of emphasize that because one of the complaints I've seen about this book is that it only looks at the Judeo-Christian heaven and hell, not like a complete history of the afterlife, which is a little misleading, I guess, from the title. I didn't really expect it personally to go into any other religious paths. I mean, it says heaven and hell. I figured Judeo-Christian. But if you are wanting a book about all the afterlives ever, this is not for you. This very much focuses on what the Jews traditionally believed, how potentially Greco-Roman views on the afterlife affected the Jews' beliefs on the afterlife, what Christ likely believed during his time, and then what early Christians believed and how the beliefs of the afterlife kind of changed and evolved. I gave this book a 4 out of 5. For a nonfiction book, it was very readable. I enjoyed it. I thought it presented a lot of good information. If you are very religious and one of those people who believe that the Bible is the absolute Word of God, every sentence, every page, this is probably not a book you will enjoy. If you are more, if you tend to look at the Bible from a scholarly perspective and, believe that some of what's in the Bible might be metaphor or some things might be, might not be fully explained, a different view, a different religious view. If you are hardcore, the Bible is the Word of God, every sentence, every word, this is not the book for you. If you can look at the Bible from a scholarly perspective and see kind of things about the origin and how the Judeo-Christian beliefs were similar and different to the other groups that they lived around at the time of Christ and when Christianity came to be, this might interest you. There are a couple things I wanted to point out. The author grew up very religious, and they are now non-religious. They do not believe in any kind of afterlife, which they state in like the afterword of the book. So just know that going in before you decide if this is a book that you are interested in. I didn't feel that the author was particularly anti-Christian. I just felt like they had stepped away from the Bible as a literal Word of God into a more scholarly, historical book. Since I left the religion of my childhood, have been trying to explore the Bible in a scholarly way as well, because I'm still not 100% sure where my belief systems work and fall, and religion's complicated. So anyway, enjoyed it, was very readable, 4 out of 5. The second book I finished this month was a graphic novel called Little Nightmares. This was a doozy. So I had played the game, and I actually got this graphic novel because the game was confusing. I didn't understand the plot. I didn't understand what I was supposed... Like, I understood how to play the game. It's a puzzle game. But I didn't really understand the setting or what was going on. And I really wanted to know more and hoped that the graphic novel would be enlightening. It was not enlightening. It was equally confusing. As a standalone book, I probably would have given it a 2 out of 5. But considering that the game was equally confusing, and this was very similar to the game, I felt like it was doing what it was intended to do, even if that's not what I wanted it to do. It does have really pretty graphics. It's creepy. I can't give you a good summary because it's a confusing book, but this little girl is on a ship called the Mall, and there's other children there, and they talk about the horrific things they've seen. It's confusing. I didn't really understand it. I still don't understand any more about the game. And I will say I was personally a little bit offended by some of the... Part of the reason I wanted to read this is there are very morbidly obese characters in the game. And I was trying to figure out what the statement was about them. I believe you can kind of see them in this picture on the back here. And I was hoping to get more of an idea of why we were doing this in the game, because the game kind of really made them disgusting, and I wasn't sure if they were supposed to be a metaphor for gluttony. A couple of sites I'd read had said they were eating the children on the ship. The Little Nightmares does not specifically say, hey, these people are eating the children. But it was just confusing. I didn't really get what I wanted from it, but like I said, I think as a tie-in to the game, it was appropriate for what it was trying to do. The first book I started in the month, I do believe, but the one that the next one I finished, and the book that was from my own TBR that was a gift from my brother, was Scythe. Alright, so in the world of Scythe, humans cannot die. And there are these people called Scythe who are in charge of deciding who does die. So basically, people can't die naturally, you're not going to die of disease, your heart's not going to give out. Even if you have an accident, like, you get run over by a train, you're not going to die. But if a Scythe gleans you, that is the end. That's all over for you. I'd heard really good things about this book, and I really did enjoy it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I don't know if I mentioned, there's 2 teenagers who are apprentices to become Scythes, and that's who we follow in this book. So I really love the world building, I really love the exploration of death. There are some really, really great characters in this book. There were a couple things that didn't 100% work for me, and one of them was some of the things towards the end. There is a kind of murder mystery in the story, and I didn't find the way that was played very satisfying. Also, in some of the later parts of this book, the pacing was just really fast, everything was going on, and the things that I enjoyed about the book were not quite as upfront as, what was happening in that moment. It wasn't bad, it wasn't terrible, but I was a little less engaged with it. Overall, though, I really enjoyed this, and I liked that even though it was a young adult, it asked a lot of questions. Oh, one other thing I didn't love, and I think it's a young adult, so that's probably why they had it. There is a bit of a romance, kind of, between 2 characters, and I didn't think it was necessary. As a matter of fact, I thought it was a hindrance to the story, and in some ways didn't work at all. But again, when you read young adult, there's always a little bit of romance, or there seems to be. So I'm not mad at it. I expected that, but I didn't love that aspect. So a couple things that weren't great, but overall, the world's great, the characters are great. I had a good time. The last book I read this month, and I read it as an audiobook, so I do not have a physical copy to show you, was Ready Player One. And as a matter of fact, I wore my Yoshi shirt because I am a gamer. I'm not like a hardcore gamer, but I love video games. And I think if you love video games, you will probably really enjoy Ready Player One. So Ready Player One is about a character named Wade, and he lives in a dystopian future where people kind of enter this virtual reality called the Oasis to get away from the crappy world around them. So they have a lot of issues with, environmental things have happened, and fuel is difficult to get, and food is difficult to get, and there's a lot of poverty, and it's just a rough world. And so these people are really involved in this virtual reality game. When the creator of the game died, he created a Easter egg in the game. And basically the characters had to go on this adventure and quest, and whoever found the Easter egg first was the one who would win the prize. And the prize happens to be quite a bit of money and partial control of the Oasis. And that is huge in a world where people, particularly Wade, are, literally living in the slums and basically starving. So Wade is one of the people who has decided to go on this adventure and try to find the egg that was left to turn around his life and make himself a millionaire, bring himself out of poverty, etc. I also wanted to say I had watched the movie before, and we just rewatched it, and I'm going to be doing a book versus movie comparison. If you have watched the movie and are going into the book, just know they are very, very different. I think I enjoyed the book because I enjoyed the gaming references, I enjoyed the world, I enjoyed a lot of the side characters. Wade himself, I had kind of mixed feelings about as a character. I also had some issues with the plot. So adventure stories are not really my thing, and the fact that I was engaged throughout tells you how good the writing was and, how enjoyable this was, because in 2018 or 2019, I'm not sure, I read A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, and I really had a hard time appreciating it because it's basically an adventure story. And so I was a little hesitant going into this one, thinking, it's an adventure story, am I really going to have a good time? I did, overall, and I really enjoyed what was happening. I enjoyed how some of the stakes, like the poverty, were real world stakes. On the other hand, there were a couple issues I had with the book. A couple things that were problems for me. I didn't always find Wade to be a very likable character. As a matter of fact, there were sometimes I very strongly disliked him. And he is our hero and who we're supposed to be rooting for. And sometimes I just couldn't really root for him. For instance, he was rejected by a girl at one point, and the way he responded to that really didn't work for me. And there were just several times throughout the book that Wade really I didn't like him. And it is told in first person, so that's kind of tough to have somebody who's kind of unlikable that you're following. But, so that was one thing. Another issue I had when it came to the plot was Wade almost seems to get out of everything or get what he needs too easily. And sometimes it's set up well and you can kind of be like, okay. For instance, there's a time in the game that he wins this artifact and he doesn't know what it does. And later, he needs the artifact and it's there and it does its thing, and that's great. But there's other times that stuff like that kind of happens where it wasn't really set up well. And so we're like, wait a second. So you mean to tell me that you just happen to need this thing, and this thing, you just found it, or you didn't tell us you found it, and you're going to do this, and you bought that thing off of, eBay 6 months ago, but, you're just now telling us about it because it's involved in what you're doing. There were a lot of moments like that in the book where I just felt like, he had it very, he didn't have a lot of challenges meeting his goals. He very much always had what he needed, and that was kind of irritating. Also, especially near the end, there is an epic, wonderful battle scene, like a video game epic battle scene. But the problem I had with it is that it takes place in the Oasis. And in the Oasis, if you die, you lose your stuff and you have to restart your avatar. But it just didn't feel like a very high stakes game to me, even though it was supposed to, because I knew that even if Wade was killed, he just goes back to a player, a 0 level player with nothing and has to start over. So I understood that there were consequences a little beyond that in this epic battle, but it wasn't the same as an epic battle where people die. So there were things like that kept it from being a 5 out of 5. Like, this is still a fun book. It was still one that I really had a good time with. I will tell you too, though, if you are really big into the 80s, you might enjoy it more than I did. I was born in the 80s, but I was a child through most of the 80s. And Halliday, who's the guy who created the Easter egg, a lot of the stuff related to the Easter egg is stuff that was in his childhood, or like teenage years in the 80s. So it's stuff that I sometimes vaguely had heard of, like, for instance, Lady Hawk, the movie, and Monty Python and the Holy Grail, of course, I've seen. But a lot of the other references to pop cultural stuff from the time were stuff that I really hadn't experienced and didn't have any nostalgia for. And I will say, with the movie version, they do a lot better at bringing a lot more 90s nostalgia into it. So, like, I wish I'd have felt the nostalgic stuff I felt when I was watching the movie versus when I was reading the book. For the book, because I really wasn't as into the 80s, I couldn't quite relate. So, like, to the nostalgia and a lot of the stuff I'd never heard of and didn't know anything about. So, again, like I said, it was a 4, which for me, a 4 is better than average. My rating system, I should probably mention because it's been a while, is 3 is an average book. 2 is below average, 4 is above average. A 5 is something I really, really loved. So this book was definitely above average, but it wasn't a new favorite, wasn't something I absolutely loved, but it was still a good time. I don't know if I will read the sequel, because I know the sequel just came out, and I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about it. So I'm not sure if I'll read Ready Player 2, but maybe we'll see. Alright guys, this has been Jane, and those were the 4 books that I read in January 2021. What did you read? What was your best read of January, and what was your worst read of January? Also, just so you know, my social media is below. I am also an author of romance books, and my links to my books are below. If you would like to support this channel and help me to make more content, please consider reading one of my books through KDP Select if you are part of the program, or Kindle Unlimited, I think is what it's called for you guys. We call it KDP Select. I think you guys call it Kindle Unlimited. You can get it through Audible. If you're a member, you have credits. You can also get them sometimes through Overdrive if your library has the Overdrive app. So you can read for free that way, or, of course, you can purchase a book if you would like to do so. Alright guys, this has been Jane. Thank you for supporting me. Have a good day. Bye.